Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today we've got two very interesting dev blogs that were released early this morning concerning two of everyone's favorite subjects, Soviet aircraft carriers and submarines. So there's been some changes made to both. We're going to go through them in the order that they were released. If you want to read along as I read aloud, please follow the links in the description down below to get to the dev blog. I do encourage you guys to check this out for yourself. As always, I'm going to read through each section, give you guys my opinion at the end of each section, then give you guys a wrap-up of all my opinion at the end of the video. Any relevant graphs, artwork, or images I will throw up on screen as we go through it. So let's go ahead and begin. So the first one, Soviet CVs, PT 10.6, balance changes to test ships. We adjusted the parameters of some ships based on testing results. The changes will be applied to the Soviet aircraft carriers. Soviet aircraft carrier Chikhalov Tier 8 added the repair consumable to the standard skip bombers. Soviet aircraft carrier Pobeda Tier 8 changed the engine cooling consumable on attack aircraft and skip bombers. Action time of consumable reduced from 10 to 5 seconds. Number of consumables decreased from 3 to 2. Soviet aircraft carrier Admiral Nakhimov Tier 10 changed the parameters of the attack aircraft. Machine gun actions time reduced from 6 to 5 seconds. The time it takes to prepare for an attack run reduced from 3 to 2.5 seconds. Changed engine cooling consumable on attack aircraft and skip bombers. Action time of the consumable reduced from 10 to 5 seconds. Number of consumables used decreased from 3 to 2. Soviet aircraft carrier Surov Tier 6 fixed an error that caused stock torpedo bombers and skip bombers to be more effective than the researchable ones. Stock torpedo bombers amount of HP increased from 1220 to 1280. Cruise speed reduced from 108 to 99 knots. Stock skip bombers amount of HP decreased from 1710 to 1140. Researchable torpedo bombers amount of HP increased from 1220 to 1340. Cruise speed increased from 87 to 108 knots. Aircraft restoration time increased from 67 to 68. So, other changes. Reduced takeoff time for all Soviet aircraft carriers except Komsomolets. So, they got nerfed even more in some ways. Yeah, so it sounds like they're reducing the effectiveness of, first off, the engine. Well, I call it the engine boost meter, or the engine cooling consumable, to where they have one less charge of it, and it's been reduced from lasting for 10 seconds to 5 seconds, so it's like under half the time that it was beforehand. And they made some planes even slower, like the stock airplanes with the Serov. So yeah, and I know that the meme Soviet CVs overpowered gonna be. But I mean, still, they still seem pretty weak. I haven't ran across any in testing on the main server yet, so I haven't been under their attack or seen them attack or anything yet. But I mean, just looking at the numbers, I don't think they're going to be bad at all. I mean, in terms of OP-ness or anything like that, sure, they got a lot of alpha potential, but just with the health that some of these planes have, I mean, the Nakhimov plane's health isn't up here, but like the Nakhimov plane's health, which is the tier 10, her planes have less HP than Ranger's stock planes, and they go slower than FGG's planes. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with them, and they do have a heal on all the aircraft at higher tier. I don't know what type of heal it is. I don't know if they've specified on stream or somewhere else, but we don't know yet. So again, and this is some really early changes too. They got announced, what, a week, 2 weeks ago? They're already making these changes to them, so we'll see how they continue on with their development. Alright, next favorite class for everybody, submarines. So we have some test results and further changes that are coming out after the last round of submarine testing, which should include Tier 6 and Tier 10 submarines as well. Now, what is interesting is that they have been very receptive to feedback with the submarine test. I have 2 or 3 videos going over the changes that they've done, and most of the time it's exactly what the majority of the players said need to happen to submarines and to other ships with their ability to counter submarines and such. So let's take a look at what's going to happen now. I haven't read this one yet. Alright, Submarines test results and further steps. We would like to thank everyone who took part in the Submarines test held on a separate server for the great number of battles played and detailed feedback. Today we want to share the changes we plan to implement and further steps. Changes to mechanics and gameplay. Dive capacity. Submarines of all tiers will now slowly regain dive capacity while surfaced. This will make combat more diverse for the new class. However, a full depletion of dive capacity will still significantly influences a sub's survivability. That is exactly what I said, and many other players said needed to happen too, especially with the tier 6 submarines. You had like a 5-minute dive time at tier 6, which just wasn't enough to really stay alive and do much during the battle. Now at tier 10, where you have like a 10-minute dive capacity, that was a lot more useful, but you still ran into these awkward situations where you can't dive. And submarines are so frail that when you're stuck on the surface, you're just dead. The CV can come along and just dunk on you. Any ship can dunk on you at that point with like 1 or 2 salvos. So that's a very good change. And that was my main gripe. I think a lot of players' main gripe with the second round of testing, where the submarines could stay submerged and recharge the dive capacity. Many players just said, just force them to surface to recharge their batteries. That's all you needed to do, and that's what they finally done now. Took a little while, but we got there, so I think that's a very, very, very good change. Alright, sonar ping, crosshair, and torpedoes. To make sonar ping usage more comfortable, its speed has been increased. This will make interaction with maneuverable targets, cruisers, and destroyers easier. A dynamic crosshair has been added so that leading targets with sonar ping at different ranges is easier. To balance the interaction of subs with different classes, we reduce the chance of a submarine's torpedoes causing flooding and critically damaging modules. The guidance of their torpedoes has also been improved against other submarines and worsened against battleships. That's interesting. So, according to the devs, they've shifted the focus of submarines away from battleships and larger ships to going after destroyers and light cruisers now. And heavy cruisers too, obviously. Meaning that, if you get a double ping on a target, the torpedoes home a lot harder. But I don't know how you're going to make them more efficient at homing in against cruisers and destroyers, but making them less accurate against battleships. But the decrease in the flooding chance and the chance of damaging modules is very nice. I still would like to see the ability for these torpedoes to Citadel ships kind of removed, because that is still, I mean, they have reduced the damage a lot. Like, a lot. The tier 10 submarines right now, with their torpedoes, they're doing like under half of the damage that the torpedoes of the old tier 6 submarines did back in the second round of testing, when you could nuke a battleship with just 4 torpedoes and it's Citadel damage. But it's still Citadel damage, meaning you can only recover a small portion of that damage. So I'd like to see that kind of removed. But I do get to, with the minimal amount of damage that these torpedoes are doing now, that is kind of needed to keep them, competitive in the game in terms of damage dealing. All right, depth and detectability. We are planning to keep the choice of several depth levels instead of allowing meter by meter adjustments, as it gives all the necessary states for submarine gameplay wise and does not create unnecessary complications in controls. We increase the diving rudder's shift speed to make control of submarines more responsive. We want the gameplay difference between subs and destroyers to be more pronounced, so submarines detectability at periscope and operational depths will be reduced. Surface ships will be detected by submarines from the same range as from planes. Therefore, reconnaissance will not be the main task for subs. If a submarine is at operational or extreme depth, its hydrophone will detect enemy subs at the same depths. Paired with improved torpedo guidance, this will enhance sub versus sub combat. Now, the sub versus sub combat, that for me was the highlight of all the rounds of submarine testing. Now, of course, in real life, it didn't happen at all. I think it may have happened once in real life when a submarine actually sunk another submarine with a torpedo during World War II. But in the game, it's a lot of fun. Like I've said before, trying to bring your ship around and line up your torpedo tubes and trying to get your shot off at the same depth and stuff. It's really fun. It's 3-dimensional. It's a ton of fun, and it was a lot more fun before, where you could set your depth by the meter. But the already set depths, I mean, it still works. It's just not as in depth. See what I did there? As it was beforehand. But again, in my opinion, that's some of the funnest parts of these submarine tests, at least. Increasing the dive rudder's shift speed, I'm assuming that means that we can dive faster, which is good, because like I mentioned from playing the Balau, it took that sucker like 20 seconds to dive, and your dive capacity starts ticking the second you hit that button. So it's like, oh, come on, just shove it under the water already. But with the U69 and the what was it, U251, you could dive almost instantly, and that was pretty nice too. So that's a good change in my opinion, at least. All right, fighting against submarines. Changes to ASW tools will make interactions more convenient for both sides. Surface ships' depth charges will sink slower, so submarines will have more time to maneuver and possibly reduce incoming damage. It will be easier to hit submarines with the ASW plane attack, and the depth charges will deal more damage. It will be easier to hit submarines with shells at periscope depth. AP shells will have a small explosion area dealing damage to submarines. HE and SAP shells will still be more effective against subs than AP. Some ships won't have depth charges or ASW planes. Now, I wonder what their explanation is for this. Much like with other existing tools such as hydros or main battery reload boosters, some features that are exclusive to certain ships. Ships without ASW armament will be able to confront submarines thanks to the depletion of their dive capacity or in close work with their allies that do have ASW tools. So that's interesting, because back when the first or second round of testing was done, and I made a video talking about how surface ships needed something to combat submarines, a lot of players were like, well, every ship can't be an ASW ship. It's like, yeah, but like in terms of game balance, if you got two ships left on the enemy team that can't do anything to a submarine when they're below the surface, what's going to happen? And now with, like, I don't know, the Kremlin, the GK, I didn't check out the Republic, but those two, for example, those two battleships don't have an ASW plane consumable, so they can't really do much to submarines. So the GK, when the submarine spotted like periscope depth, which it can start to do with the GK's Hydro, the secondaries will absolutely just rip it a new one, like we saw in the last test. But the Kremlin, what's the Kremlin supposed to do? Just ram it? Which, I mean, sure, but yeah, but have to work with allies with ASW tools. Okay, we'll see how that goes. Matchmaking. One of the most discussed submarine related topics is their influence on matchmaking the number of ships engaged in artillery combat. One of the frequent suggestions to increase the size of teams from 12 to, for example, 15. We don't plan to increase the size of teams in the main battle type. In the main type of battle, thank you Google Translate, random battles. The balance is built around the interaction of a certain number of ships. Changing it would lead to a need to completely reconfigure all ships in the game. All maps and modes suited for 12 ships per team would have to likewise be changed. The more ships there are in battle, the less influence on the outcome each of them has. Not a lot of influence going on right now, I can tell you, what the freaking matches I'm getting. We find the influence of individual ships in the 12v12 format to be optimal for random battles. Regardless, we also understand that the matchmaker may need changes with the addition of submarines, and we're now considering additional limitations affecting multiple classes together. For example, both submarines and destroyers, or destroyers, submarines, and aircraft carriers, e.g. no more than 5 destroyers and submarines combined. At the same time, limits on each class will remain. So it sounds like they're trying to group submarines up with destroyers for the matchmaker, which I think is a happy medium, besides just limiting the submarines to a hard cap of 2 per side, because like when submarines first come out, matchmaker is going to be full of submarines. That's just how anything that new that gets added into the game, there's a bagillion of them in queue. So if they limit it to 2 per side, you could be sitting in queue for like 20 minutes in a submarine, which within the first month of their release. But the thing is, submarines take a lot away from surface combat. They're just not there because they're underwater. So there's a lot less HP in the match. There's a lot less guns in the match. There's a lot less things to shoot at on the surface. So that, I mean, I wish they could increase the battle size. I mean, like, they're saying they'd have to reconfigure almost everything to increase the size of the teams from 12 to 15. But aren't you already having to reconfigure everything for submarines already? The commander skills, having to make underwater parts of the maps. Surely it can't be much more work to go ahead and reconfigure everything else. I mean, what's left? Map design, spawn points, matchmaking, which needs a look at anyway because of like what the video yesterday was talking about. But I get it. It is a lot more work. It is a lot more work. But like, I mean, you've gone this far. Why not go ahead? I think more ships in battle would be a lot more fun anyway. More stuff to shoot at. I'd like that. But again, I'm not a game designer. That's just my 2 cents. All right. Other changes. We continue to work on the game elements related to the new class, updating balance changes, working on skills, upgrades and symbols, working on the underwater world is ongoing. More and more maps are slowly but surely becoming ready for submarines and having invisible islands in the middle of them. Working on the interface in the future, we'll consider adding a visual representation of a submarine's torpedo launch sector and spread cone while it is submerged. Further steps. Submarines have been through 6 open tests since their announcement in 2019, and a great number of internal and closed ones. However, testing on a separate server or in a special type of battle can't provide the same amount of data as testing in random battles does. We don't want to add submarines directly to the main type of battle, but at the same time, a new class requires a prolonged trial by a wide and stable audience. Ranked battles is a suitable type of battle for such a check. As the most similar to random battles. Again, thank you, Google Translate. That's why a special season of ranked battles will start in 10.7, which will allow taking part in submarines. They will be available for rent freely from random bundles. Such a distribution method will help to control the number of a new class ships and avoid very long queues. Besides ranked battles, submarines will be able to enter cooperative battles and be tried in more calm surroundings. You can take them into co-op. Interesting. The special ranked season will last for 11 weeks, will be similar in structure to the 3rd season. It will allow players to get to know subs much better than they would during a short test. At the same time, provide us with a large amount of feedback and data. During this check and following the results, we will continue to make changes, including to balance. Details about the season and how to get submarines will be published closer to the start of the event, and the closest opportunity to try out a new class with the previously mentioned changes will be the 10.7 public test. Please all information in the dev blog is preliminary. Announced adjustments and features may change multiple times during testing. Final information will be posted on the game's website. Okay, so ranked battles having submarines in it. A lot of people are probably already ringing. But they be speaking the truth, though. As many times as they've put submarines in a separate game mode on the main server or on their own server, be it the TST server or the PT server, they don't get the volume that they really need. Now, this time around, I am surprised on the special test server that up until pretty much the last week, about half the team was still real players, not just bots. The time before that with the submarine test, I mean, like, it was me, another submarine, and everyone else was bots. Like, I was a real sub on one team, other dude on the other side was a real sub on the enemy team. Everyone else was bots in the test before this one. But it's the truth, though. They need as much data as they can possibly get to make sure that these submarines are in as good as a shape as they can possibly be before they get released. And look, they're listening. And this is what's so painful about what happened, like with Little White Mouse and the Yukon. They're improving their ability to listen to the community, like with the submarines. Whoever is in charge of this has been doing a fantastic job of taking in the community's feedback. And then something like Little White Mouse and the Yukon happened, unfortunately. But a lot of these changes, in my opinion, are very good. Very reasonable changes that needed to happen. Some of their explanations make sense for some things, but they don't for other things, like with the ASW plane only being available to some capital ships, not all capital ships. But, well, again, we'll see how that works. But, I mean, at the end of the day, at the end of the match, when you get 2 ships with no ASW tools against submarines, what are they going to do, you know? But, again, we'll see what happens. So, that's what's happening with submarines, and 10.7 will be the next round of testing and ranked battles, and we'll see how that goes. That's going to be a hoot, I'm sure. Plenty of memes are in store for us. But, yeah, A lot of interesting information and some very important information from these two dev blogs. Again, if you want to check them out for yourself, please check out the links in the description down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 30,000 subs. We just passed 26,900 a few days ago, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. I will be live streaming here tonight on the channel and on Twitch from 5 p.m. U.S. Central Time to 8 p.m. U.S. Central Time. Again, here on the channel and on Twitch, so make sure you come out and join us for that. Again, guys, hope you're having a wonderful Friday. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.